I'm Yates Norton. I'm a curator currently working at Rupert, which is a contemporary art centre in Vilnius in Lithuania. We're very grateful to Helen Turner and Catherine Thompson at E-WERK in Luckenwalde in Berlin for inviting us to be part of this series. And I'll hand over to Bik Van der Pol.
Hi, we are Bik Van der Pol. I am Lisbeth.
I am Jos Van der Pol.
Bik Van der Pol is made up of our family names, so I'm actually Lisbeth Bik and Jos Van der Pol, like a lawyer's office basically. And we are working together since 1994, officially, something like that.
4 or 5.
Yeah, 4 or 5. And before this, and we spoke about this together also, before this collaboration started, I was a painter, Jos was a sculptor, and then at some point we grew in working together as a collective, and since then we are doing that actually. So
maybe we could start with this quote, which we didn't read out when we last chatted, because it really gets to the heart of how you work now. And you said, so your practice moved towards a quote unquote workspace generated by dialogue and collaboration, where an encounter may happen that might result in a work and sometimes in a work of art. Employing dialogue and collaboration as central, our work is increasingly focusing on when and how public space, quote unquote, takes place, on its conditions and terms of accessibility, and on exploring where and how art can be employed to create forms of knowledge. Because similar to a collective practice, public space is a space of dissensus, a space of learning by doing, of negotiating difference, of speculation and conflict. It is not a clean, preset space, but one that is murky, full of noise, and continuously contested. I think I wanted to ask a question about how you think of resistance, because that's a big part of a lot of discussions around artistic practices today, like to what extent and how successful, quote unquote, they are at resisting neoliberal capitalism or racism or a whole range of things. And what I think is hopeful about your work is that it's not that you don't position your work against something huge and kind of terrifying, but it's quite granular and detailed. You look at a situation and then your resistance is like, okay, well, to me it seems like your resistance works along these lines of thinking, okay, well, I have all these little things, I've turned over this stone, I've been surprised by this. How do we bring this together and build something out of that? So in that sense, it seems to me that it's quite a kind of hopeful political project, because there's something kind of creative and capacity building about it.
Yeah, I think that has to do also with giving voice, no, and what I referred to before as well, no, like being in dialogue or getting into a dialogue in a conversation or in meeting others, no, or meeting others, not necessarily only other human beings, but also meeting other situations or other things that are called facts maybe, and that you think, oh, why is this? No, I think I would say that we are not, I don't know, the resistance, maybe that's not, for me, not such a good word, because I think in a way, I do think that resistance and revolutions are really interesting and exciting concepts, but I'm always thinking, okay, and what then after that? No, what then after the resistance? What after we have resisted power or repression or access or non-access to something? No, what then do we do with it? No, so yes, there is sometimes a resistance in a situation that sort of presents itself to you, or something that you would like to know about more and that you don't seem to get, let's say, behind, you don't get it out or something, which is of course great if you manage to do that. But then if you have managed to do that, you still need to unpack it. You still need to chop it up a little bit and to sort of to say like, hey, what is this that I have in front of me? And having learned, like Jos is saying, more and more about everything that is connected to it, facts and fiction, then what can we make of this, in relation to where we are today?
It seems to me a lot of your work is about is and this is where the title of our conversation comes from, is this question of reconfiguring what is already there. So moving into a space and working with what exists, making the time to work with what is there, and making the space for allowing people to put attention on what is already there. And it's interesting, Elizabeth, that you were saying how with painting there was this pressure to be new and innovative and do something different, whereas both of your practices, that it's not about doing something new but drawing out something that is already there. It's about pushing against this a culture and a way of thinking which is based on innovation and competition. And it seems to me that with your work, it's more about, thinking through what can we make possible, even in situations where people have been told that it's impossible to do something. And
yeah, I think this idea of making something new and making something original and authentic, that comes from indeed such a culture of competition, to sort of a rat race towards the best idea or towards the best form for an idea, and to also, let's say, the idea of the genius that finds that thing, whether it's a concept or an object, in order to become into eternity somehow, becomes, let's say, history as he is writing it. I think definitely in the 80s and the 90s, let's say, it was much more a he than a she that did that. I think today, thank God, it's changed a little bit. I would say, but I think we. And throughout our work and practice, and maybe also, I never say I stopped with painting. I don't also think you would say I stopped being a sculptor or something, because I would say rather that the medium changes. The medium of painting. I had such fundamental discussions with fellow painters, about let's say the importance of painting and how high painting would be on the ladder of all these different disciplines as maybe the mother of arts somehow, or father of arts. And I was like, what is this about? What is this about? What can painting do? What can painting do other than being in that, let's say, confinement of its own medium? That's like the queen or the king of all mediums, and what I really felt like what is at stake, let's say, when more media are actually available to you, and the media could be curating, or what we call curating, writing, organizing, chatting, hanging out, that's all activities that are as valuable, I would say, as any other activity that we may call a medium for arts. So if there's no space in painting or in sculpturing, maybe in the way that we were thinking at the time, if there's no space to do that, then you have to drop that medium as a closed-off medium, and to sort of redefine your own way of working and sort of create some kind of space and freedom again, which is a continuous project, or a continuous practice, I would say. So this whole idea of authenticity and the best idea and the newness of things, is like, I think as soon as you become aware, let's say, of a world that's bigger than yourself or your street or your village or your town or your country, you are becoming aware also that there's no such thing as the best idea. No, we cannot possibly maintain this idea of being a genius or something with 7 billion people on this planet.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what, at least for me, made it possible to sort of get rid of that illusion of being new, and also this kind of ambition, because I think it's also an ambition, a cultural ambition that's maybe, for me at least, not so interesting.
But also the question of commodity. You're producing things for commodity, for a market. At the same time, you could question, what's the value of each time producing something new, instead of doing other things like looking back or re-evaluating certain objects or copying or all these things.
Yeah, and what is happening in the copying is maybe more interesting in that sense.
Yeah, and also that a product is not becoming a product because it would disappear after a certain period of time. Also, for example, the kitchen is taken down again after this period, packed, put in storage. Now it's destroyed because it lost its function, because the original kitchen is not there anymore. So in that sense, it pops up and it disappears. So it's not, in a sense, in the economic sense, it's not a commodity you can own. It's an experience you take with you instead of a material object you hang on the wall or something.
That's interesting, because I think that also brings up this question of emergence, that I think is a big part of your work. So allowing things to emerge or pop up and then maybe they disappear again. I'm reminded of Caroline Strauss writes, she draws on this idea of a swamp or something where things kind of rise to the surface and then they might sink down again. And that is this continuous process. It's not this kind of spectacular before and after, there wasn't this and now there's this. And I like this idea too, Jos, of looking back as well, because I think that draws on an idea of repair and restoration, which I think is a big part of your work too, which is another aspect of your work which it's not about newness or innovation, or it's about thinking, well, what do we have and how do we reorganize, rearrange, or this word that we've been using, reconfigure. I think the question that comes up for me though is responsibility, because and this also relates to the idea of commitment, because when you rearrange something or reconfigure it, you allow certain things to come into being, and then you might not allow other things to come into being. So, some voices might be silenced, or other voices might re-emerge, and it's, as you say, it's this kind of continuous negotiation. And I really like. I've always been so struck by this kind of definition of responsibility that Karen Barad gives, of this kind of a bit making something or someone, or giving something or someone the ability or the capacity to respond, and it's a form of agency that is involved in responsibility, and yeah. So I wanted to think about how in your work you because part of your work is about sort of scripting in a way, you set up these conditions, and I think you have actually kind of written a loose script for some of your works, and then also not knowing what's going to happen. So what are the unintended consequences, or what might happen further down the line? And I wanted to ask you how you thought about responsibility in relation to those things that you don't know are going to happen, or in relation to the conditions that you set up. Because part of your work is about sort of scripting in a way, you set up these conditions, and I think you have actually kind of written a loose script for some of your works, and then also not knowing what's going to happen. So what are the unintended consequences, or what might happen further down the line? And I wanted to ask you how you thought about responsibility in relation to those things that you don't know are going to happen, or in relation to the conditions that you set up. So how do you maintain your responsibility toward the people involved in your project, or the situation that you're in?
I would, yeah, it's like also that is part of a process. You mentioned the word commitment also quite often in your preparational document, let's say, for this conversation. But I think commitment and curiosity in that sense are key, no? And also we sort of referred to this passing through, passing by, no, en passant. En passant is in passing through or passing by is something that is I don't consider as superfluous, or not as something that is always on the run for something, but in sort of passing by and touching, no? So once you touch something, or once you are being touched by something or by somebody, or maybe by a phenomena or a situation, curiosity invites you to sort of dive into that, no? And then to stay with that, it means that you committed to it, no? So I think in this commitment, let's say, you can you will have to run into the unknown, no? Or the things that you don't know. So when you mention scripts, now scripts are in our case not pre-written. They always are written on the go, in passing, you could say, no? They are always, let's say, part of the process, and part of the process is also conversations, dialogues with people.
Responsibility, but also trying to commit the people by sharing, you know, your ideas and opening it up without saying this is this. It's not pure in concrete, you know, it's fluid. So it's a beginning, and then together you build on the project in a sense, and then you even, I think, give the responsibility to the other. Like, for example, in Poland, in Warsaw, we gave the responsibility to the performers itself, you know, or the freedom. I wouldn't even say responsibility, but it's more the freedom to play and to interpret, to make your own story, what you think it's important, based also on your own experiences. Yeah, the work can surprise us, you know, in multiple ways. Also thinking, for example, you know, the Sao Paulo biennial, you know, in principle we made this whole structure, and, you know, this moving billboard, you know, which was changing every day. And then throughout the whole exhibition period, which was 4 months or 3 months, the people who we gave the responsibility to, they became so much skilled in a sense that they surprised us every day. One moment, you know, one of the curators phoned us up, and she said, she was really in panic, and she said, oh, they stole all parts of the installation, because normally it was, you know, with all the primary colors were there, and suddenly there were only the colors of red. But they did it on purpose, because they said, because, you know, in Brazil, the only thing what was left, what was not stolen from Brazil, was the earth, and the earth is the color of red. It's also bringing something back which we didn't know. It's like, it's talking to us, it's teaching us something, which is quite amazing, I think.